doing that, right?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we have quorum now and YouTube is running, so we are live streamed. So I'll turn it over to you, Madam Chair.
The meeting should be messy and the amendment. No, it's because we just.
Is everything okay on your end, Janice?
Yeah, so basically.
Sorry, I had a live feed from CBC in my ear and I thought it was from this meeting. Sorry, the radio was, I had gunshots going off. Anyways, it was a news brief. My apologies, everybody. I'm with you now. Whew, that was quite upsetting. Okay, with confirmation that we have quorum, I will call this meeting to order at 1:03 p.m. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for being here. Second on the agenda is approval of the agenda. So this is the first item. Can I have a mover and a seconder? I see Dinah Cotter and I see Chantal Buzinski. So with that, is everybody in favor? Yes. Okay. That is carried. Number 3, confirmation of the minutes. So we need a confirmation of the minutes from the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee from September 7th, 2023. If there are no amendments, do I see any amendments? No. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Susan Mockler and Councillor Tozo, thank you very much. Okay, all in favor? Everybody seems to be in favor. Okay, carried. Are there any, number 4, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today at all on today's agenda? No? Seeing none, we will move on to the next item. Delegation. So our only delegate for this meeting is Joseph Dower, who will present to the committee regarding the accomplishments and planned initiatives of the Kingston Area Taxi Commission. Welcome, Joseph. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for once again the opportunity to provide you with information and updates, both current and future, respecting accessible taxi service. When I last attended the MAAC as a delegation this past June, I apprised the committee on matters respecting accessible taxi service and afterwards received numerous questions regarding. I trust my answers at that time aided in providing for clarity. From that discussion and questions, I took with me key points of concern, such as access to service, availability, and quality of assistance. However, one item that I feel is important to include is communication. With that said, I wish to state for the record that unlike the commissions of the past, this commission, under its current leadership, will remain in constant contact with the MAAC on all matters of accessibility. As I've stated in previous sessions of council, to some who can attest, I hope that you will all get used to seeing my face. I would also hope that this committee will do the same, reaching out to the KATC. As councillors and staff know, I can be reached anytime. As you are aware, the Commission enacted the creation of an accessible committee, whereas its principal focus is to deliver upon the needs and requirements of our vulnerable citizens and putting forth positive and progressive initiatives and programs, ensuring barrier-free access to accessible service. Matters of accessibility will not be discounted or backbenched. Respecting the key points mentioned earlier, I wish to ensure this committee again that the KATC continues its efforts to improve upon and grow our accessible community. In 2023, we have made the following improvements. We have updated our telephone systems for greater access to accessible service, including francophone options. We have increased the number of accessible taxi cabs in operation. We have inspected all accessible taxi cabs, provided recommendations where required. We have increased the number of accessible licensed drivers to ensure continuous operation of accessible taxi cabs. We have apprised and addressed the industry on the gold standards required by all operators of accessible taxi cabs, as referenced in bylaw number 3. And we have created a public-facing Facebook group specific to accessible committee and matters of accessibility within the community. Aside from many other advancements not mentioned for the sake of time, I am excited to also announce that as of this June and effective September 1st, 2023, the KATC has entered into an accessible agreement in partnership with Loyalist Township to provide subsidized accessible taxi service to individuals residing in Loyalist. Individuals who are part of the Loyalist Accessible Taxi Transit Program, otherwise known as the LATP, pay only $3.50 per taxi service and can book ahead of time or have on-demand service. It is our hopes that soon we can create and implement a similar program in partnership with the City of Kingston that again ensures barrier-free access to accessible service. 2024 will see many more positive and progressive initiatives come to fruition, such as the continued growth of the number of available taxi cabs and owners, incentive programs to attract and retain accessible licensed operators, green vehicle rebates and accessible vehicle purchase subsidies, subsidized fares for patrons of accessible taxi cabs similar to the LATP, increased sensitivity and accessible training programs under the AODA for operators, increased enforcement and record-keeping requirements, the diversion of a percentage of funds received from TNC fees to accessible programs, and the KATC and the Accessible Committee will continue to work tirelessly on behalf of the stakeholders, the industry, and the accessible community. It is our goal to have no less than 25% of the current taxi fleet be accessible taxi cab vehicles, and to have these vehicles in operation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I am positive that with our continued attention to matters of accessibility, in conjunction with communication with this committee and the community, that we will succeed in obtaining this goal and to bring forth a new era of inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility to all members of our community. Again, please feel free to contact me directly anytime to discuss matters of accessibility or concern. And again, I thank you for your time and your opportunity and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. As always, it's a great presentation. We really appreciate your attention to detail, and it was really, really well done. So do any of the members of the committee have any questions for Joseph today? Susan Mockler, I see your hand up.
Hi, thank you so much. And thank you for your commitment. It shows through in your presentation. I just had a question that I don't think I had before. But when you talk about the taxis being accessible, what exactly does that mean? Are those accessible vans? Or maybe if you could just explain that a bit. I'm just curious in terms of the 25% goal, what that involves.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the question. Accessible vehicles are defined under the taxi bylaw number 3 as typically a van that has been outfitted with equipment that can provide either a ramp or a lift, with also the securing equipment within the vehicle to provide for a safe, secure, and reliable transportation service. Now, certain levels of accessibility are being explored in the future that, as we know, not all accessible passengers require the use of a full-sized lift van. Therefore, we're examining and exploring options to also have larger sized vehicles, not to be saying that they are vans, but more like a sedan based, or let's use a Lincoln Town car as an example because of its size. We would make the leg room and all that to be accessible serviced, and those people would also, or those operators would also be able to use those taxi cabs as accessible vehicles based upon the level of need of the patron that's requiring it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Tozo, I see your hand up next.
Thank you. And thank you, Joseph. Great presentation and just good to see you, bud.
Always.
Always. So a question I have for you is when you talked about accessing the services. What does that look like when someone calls in to access it, and what accessible features are there? Because there's a variety of different abilities and capabilities people have. And is this also available on? I know some taxi services use apps as well. Have they been more accessible as well, or is this just the phone service that's been put through that lens?
Okay, so great question, Brandon. As always, put me under the gun.
No pressure.
And I have no
pressure.
problems with that. No problems with that. It's always best to ask those key important questions. With the terms accessible service in our phone systems, what we've done is we've actually created a augmented voice service, which allows for clear, crisp communication. When you call the KATC, we have two phone numbers. We have our main line and we have our 877 hotline, which for the record is 877-613-TAXI. When patrons or individuals use that number, they are directed to, of course, our IVR system, which provides that voice very clear and concise. The first option is if you are looking for taxi service, press 1. If that individual presses that, it will give the list of the available brokers and they select from that list. Now, the third option is accessible service. If an individual presses number 3, again, it lists off the brokers that are available, but when transferring that to the brokers, it comes up as a priority call. And through that, it ensures that the accessible community is receiving the attention as any other patron would without being backbenched or pushed to the side based upon availability. The other options that we also have is that we've updated our website to be more accessible and inclusive. If you go to the katc.ca and there's a little button there that says accessible services, you can click on that. And it, of course, provides the services that we have here, links to the brokers, and of course, a detailed explanation of the new LATP program with Loyalist and how to access that program and use to utilization, which of course we hope to do with the City of Kingston as well and add that to the list.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. And thank you for your great work. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you again, too.
Thanks, Joseph, and for the question. Dinah, I did see your hand up the last time as well. You are next in line.
Okay, Joseph, thank you. So a couple questions. Why don't we talk about accessibility in the different vehicles? So there is the ramp. I know that some people ask for a low rider, which for people that aren't aware, some people use walkers, but they have a problem getting from the seat and up. So a low rider would be obviously a lower car that they're able to access. So I'm wondering, when we're looking at different vehicles, have you thought of different classifications for vehicles for differing disabilities when you do different vehicles and what that might look like? Also, I guess my next question is, when you talk about the LATP for Loyalist Township and stuff, is there, or do you see down the road there being a similar service for out Battersea Way, for like Country Pines, Fairmont Way happening?
Okay, so two-part question. So let me level them out as they came in. So the first one is to the degrees of, or the types of taxi cabs or vehicles that will be used to the accessible service. So again, that is a program that we're looking into. Right now, the bylaw states that it has to be an access van, but of course, with all bylaws, we can make amendments and adjustments where appropriate. Bringing in, from 1895 to the 22nd century is a phrase I constantly use. What we are going to be looking at is the different classifications of standard motor vehicles that we can use also to aid with the accessible community. For example, you had mentioned walkers. A walker does not require a vehicle that's a full-size van with a ramp and about a foot off the ground, but it could pass with a sedan that is designed to or equipped to carry walkers or wheelchairs for limited mobility versus non-mobility. And that is an option that we're looking into to see if we can expand upon that, which will make it greater ease for operators to purchase as well, because as you know, with a van, they have to convert it with the ramp and all that. And that takes a substantial amount of fiscal responsibility, commitment and investment, whereas a vehicle that does not need to have such equipment installed could be put into service in a quick relative turnaround. Now, to your other question with the LATP, what we are looking at is this hopes that we can bring forth a program that's similar to that to Kingston. And of course, as we grow the program, we expect to expand our borders to include places such as Battersea, Harrow Smith. We like to expand outside of the jurisdictions to ensure that people in rural communities and northern communities can still make it into the city and back again without any hindrance to their timelines or to their appointments.
And if I can just add to the one for vehicles, often it's not possible because of limited accessible vehicles for, especially when there's a few people going to the same place at the same time for different functions. I think that it may ease up on the accessible vehicles if others with different mobility aids can access the other vehicles. So I think that from a accessibility standpoint, it would be really helpful if that were to come into play, that with the differing vehicles. So that's just my input. So thank you very much. No, go ahead.
I truly appreciate the input. Input is always good. Communication is important, as I mentioned in my delegation. The more we know, the more we can assist, the more that it's brought to our attention, the more we can react. You're absolutely correct. If we could have different types of vehicles to the degree of accessible requirements, it would make for a much robust system to serve all patrons. One of the things that is part of the LATP is a training program for the dispatchers, which will be rolled out very shortly with them, with regards to how to assess need for an accessible vehicle, and key questions and key concerns are brought up through the call, and that will determine whether or not it would be a regular car, a updated or improved upon car, or a full access van. And that it will come through the dispatch as part of a training program that Loyalist and the KATC have worked on to create proper phone scripts to address in a sensitive manner how to get the proper vehicle to the individual.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dinah. Great questions. And Joseph, you've obviously thought about all of these options, so it's great to see. Kim, you are next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Joseph, for your efforts. Greatly appreciated. I have two questions, maybe three. First, you mentioned that you've increased the number of accessible vehicles. So I'm wondering how many taxis are now available in the Kingston area? And if we're servicing Loyalists, which is wonderful, will that reduce the minimum number of taxis available within the city limits if we're outreaching to rural areas? Or will we be maintaining a minimum number of taxis available within city limits? And my second question is, who's responsible for training drivers and dispatchers?
Okay, so excellent questions. Again, I'm going to take them as they came in. So the first one was the number of available taxi cabs and the increase to it. So currently, so as of last year, I'm going to say 2022, before the enactment of the accessible committee, there were officially 6 licensed plates that were issued by the previous commissions. Of that, only 2 vehicles were in operation. Now there are currently 12 issued, sorry, forgive me, because 3 are still on hold. There are currently 9 issued accessible plates with a total of 6 vehicles on the road. They are required to have, each plate holder is required to have at least one of their vehicles on the road 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And each brokerage house, such as Amy's or Modern, is required to have 1 vehicle on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, similar to that of the plate holder. So that ensures that there's some layover between the two, so that that service doesn't discontinue or depreciate or diminish over time. One of the problems that the industry has come to us is the availability of drivers, which is why we're creating incentive programs to bring accessible drivers on board and to retain them for the long run instead of short turnovers on a on-need basis. It's always good to retain trained persons, then have to retrain, and it keeps the consistency. To the second part of that question, with regards to ensuring that there are still accessible taxi cabs within the city limits, that's left up to the brokerage houses. They are very good at doing that. I can speak to both Amy's and Modern, that they don't send their accessible vehicles far out of town. Loyalist is currently servicing on the LATP program, the Route 10 of the Kingston Transit, which is pretty much primarily Amherst View, but with time will expand to the boundaries of Loyalist. And what we've seen so far is the program is working quite well in tandem with the availability to the cabs the accessible cabs that are still available in Kingston. And we haven't seen any concerns or as in the past to availability. But of course, as the fleet increases, we hope to ensure that no one goes without service. So if it's 4 a.m. in the morning and someone with an accessible need needs to have an accessible van, then that van should be available from a plethora of vans that are on the road.
Great, thank you.
And what about the training?
Oh, yes, sorry, I forgot. So it was 3 questions. The first one was broken into 2, and the last one is actually a third. So the training implementation is something that the KATC is working on in conjunctions with the province's AODA requirements. Recently, we made changes to the driver's licenses and the badges that require a clear indicator that this individual is accessible trained, and also when they are due for their retraining. So on the back of their newly designed licenses, the first thing that the individual will see is accessible trained? Yes. And then it will say recertification date, and then it's pretty much 3 years into the future. So the goal is each accessible driver will have to undergo new training every 3 years as laws and acts and legislature changes to make sure they're up to date and key to the needs of the community. One of the other parts about the training is that all training and testing is done here at the commission. It's proctored, and if an individual is struggling, we always provide assistance. We will not provide the answer, but we also encourage them to ask the questions so that they can also grow within their field.
Is the training, does it include like safety training, how to properly strap down different wheelchairs? Or is it just customer service accessibility training?
Okay, and I understand the question. So one of the big keys that I've always known with any industry is it's what I call PSI. It's product, service, and image. And one of the key aspects, especially with accessible service, is service. It's not just, the training isn't just specific to how to handle a customer or how to handle an accessible individual. Or what service standards are there. It includes regulations of the AODA. It includes regulations of bylaw number 3. And of course, it includes the improved service and the gold standards that are required for dealing with accessible passengers. One of the things I always say to our testees is that if you ever feel that you have a struggle with accessible service or what needs to be done, picture this. It's your grandmother in the back of the car that needs to go to her doctor's appointment. How would you treat your grandmother? And that sort of eliminates any questions as to a depreciated level of service or that. So for the most part, I would say that the operators that are driving the accessible cabs now are picturing everyone as if it's one of their family members that is getting to their appointments, and they treat them with the same respect as they would their family.
That's
Great,
great,
thanks,
but,
Charlie.
but who's ensuring safe tie downs? Do you have supervisors checking that the drivers are doing what they should be doing?
Yes, we have an enforcement branch that if there is a concern that a patron can always call that 877 number. That 877 number is routed to the commission immediately during our open hours. And then we will dispatch one of our security officers or our enforcement officers to the location to retrain. If there is a severity case, then we will contact the brokerage house to have that accessible cab arrive to the commission for immediate inspection and retraining. Typically, it's a shoulder tap. We do leave a lot of the training to the plate holders with regards to any add-on training. So we leave a base training, but if the accessible driver wants to say, hey, you can offer a water, hey, or improve upon that, they're more than welcome to do so. But with regards to enforcement, I encourage anybody who has any issues with taxi service or accessible service to use and utilize the 877 number or the commission's email and bring it forth to our attention so we can address it immediately.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Sorry, I was trying to get to it, but I didn't understand if it was meant to the enforcement aspect. But yes, we definitely enforce all bylaws and causes within the bylaws.
Thanks, Joseph. Thanks for your questions, Kim. Chantal, you've been waiting very patiently. You're next.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear
Yes.
you. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so a family member of mine is part of the deaf community, so deaf and hard of hearing, and also she knows members of the blind and hard of sight community. And so I'm just wondering if there is anything in place for accessibility for members of those communities, just for example, like a TTY machine. And if there isn't yet, could there be given due consideration for said items in future?
That is a brilliant point, and I like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write, I don't know if you can see my notepad here, but it's kind of shilling me out. I'm immediately going to put this onto a point of contention to bring forth to the Accessible Committee, which meets again next month, into bringing forth a report and some sort of information guidelines as to the availability of TTY machines or availability to help individuals who are deaf, hard of hearing, or have I believe the term is still mute, with regards to being able to communicate with the driver and the driver being able to communicate back to ensure that everybody is included. So I'm going to write that down right now, TTY machines for accessible services.
And not just TTY, also for the blind community as well, because TTY is for deaf. Yeah, and they're very, very different needs. I don't really understand the blind community needs because my family member's deaf, but they're very different needs, and both should be looked at.
Excellent and brilliant point, and I thank you for it. And it will be definitely looked at and addressed in the Accessible Committee and brought forth to the Commission. We will research that, and of course, once we have those reports, as I said, we will continue to communicate with this committee. We will forward our reports and our agendas from the Accessible Committees to the MAAC on a regular basis, so that you stay informed and we're all on the same page.
Thanks, Chantal. Susan, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just had just one other question regarding training. In terms of overall training of taxi drivers, not just those that might focus on the accessibility component, but is there an accessibility awareness because many people who might have accessibility needs may just take a regular taxi? And is there any training in place just in terms of awareness and customer service for cab drivers just in general across the board as part of their overall training?
Okay, so great question. I'm going to try and break this apart into the two different levels. The first one is training with regards to accessible patrons. I believe that was the question within the industry, or I could look at it from a different perspective to ensure that all cabbies receive proper testing, training, and examination prior to being issued a license. If, for example, a broker feels that individual needs retraining, they do send them back up, and we do have retraining programs. With regards to the accessible, we are expanding the current training program to include the AODA requirements. Before, it was mostly about how to recognize an individual with a disability or an individual that requires accessible service. But there's a lot more to that component. It's not cut and dry like people would think that black and white is two contrasting shades. There are so many wide ranges of levels of disabilities and accessibility needs that we, of course, working in tandem with the province's training programs, are incorporating that into our bylaws and into our operational procedures as part of the licensing and continuous licensing of accessible taxi cab drivers and operators, and also incorporating limited accessible training to regular taxi cab drivers, taking into account that no one can serve an accessible patron unless they are endorsed as an accessible driver.
Okay, but yeah, I guess I think you answered my question. My question was yes, that many people who have disabilities may be using regular taxis. And so the question was, do they all have some degree of training in customer service with respect to having customers with disabilities? And it sounds like yes, to some degree that's being incorporated. Is that correct?
That is correct. So part of the examination, there's 3 parts to, so all taxi cabs receive the same examination. The first part is regulations of the bylaw. So they have to list certain clauses of the bylaw that are specific to their operation of a taxi cab. The second part is knowledge of the city, awareness of landmarks, and various common sense questions. Like, for example, if you see a yellow light, should you A, proceed on the gas, B, prepare to stop, C, come to a cautious stop accordingly. It's basically a common sense component. And then the third part is the accessible component, which is that limited accessible training, which allows a person to identify a person in need, identify a person with disabilities, and how to treat and respect them accordingly with the aspect of their disability or accessible requirements. And then should that person choose to become, so there's a baseline right there. But if that person decides to also further their advancement into the accessible realm, they then undergo a further, or as like I like to say, accessible training 201 or 202. They go up to the next tier and then are applicable to the AOD training, which is a little more in depth. And if they wish to continue to advance their career into a steady, consistent, constant accessible service, then they now go into the tier 3 of the training program, which is all the provincial mandates, all the municipal mandates, all the federal mandates, and of course, common sense. So it's a tiered program system working from the base level of a regular taxi cab operator or driver all the way up to a full-time, dedicated, committed, almost like a PSW, I would say. As they advance in their career, their training changes and increases depending upon what avenue they wish to choose. So we leave room for everyone to breathe, but we always ensure that the bare minimum is required with all taxi cab drivers.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And just one quick follow-up to that. In terms of the identification and sort of treatment of the people with disabilities, now would that focus mostly on mobility disabilities? I guess to Chantal's point about the deaf community or the blind and low vision community, also developmental disabilities. You know, I know the AODA does encompass the whole range of that. And is that also reflected in the training?
It is for base level, for like entry level, I'll use that term. For entry level taxi cab operators, they do have a very, it's not brief, but it is not expanded. It's a baseline of training to identify, respect, and react to certain things. So if I give you an example, one of the questions, actually, I'll give you 2 examples of questions that tend to pop up on each and every exam. One of the first questions is, are all disabilities visible? The answers that they're provided is true or false. Are all disabilities visible? Of course, we know the answer is false. Should the individual answer true, we then open up and expand to retrain on that point, and then come back to the question and then answer the question correctly. The other question that we have is the phrase "see you later" or "gotta be running along" should never be used when dealing with a person or addressing a person with a disability. And we sort of use a play on the English language there where it should never be used. It's a true or false question. And the answer is true. You should never use those terms. So that addresses just a baseline. These are just examples of what's on the exam to show you. Now, there's other parts to the exam on the base level that go more in depth when an individual has requested accessibility service, when you have arrived and noted that your vehicle is unable to attend or address the accessible needs. What is your duty to do at that time? The answer is that the cab driver that has arrived on scene is to immediately contact the brokerage house and have a vehicle that suits the needs of the accessible patron be brought forth immediately to the location that is required.
Great, thanks so much.
It's an evolving
Great.
program that we wish, we will get to a star and gold standard that we hope will be carried across the province and maybe even across the nation. But again, baby steps. And then once we learn how to walk, which we are, we're going to start running. And once we start running, we're going to start sprinting. And once we start sprinting, we're going to work.
Yeah. Great. Kim, I see your hand up. I would just like to remind you that we're only allowed 2 questions. I will allow you a quick question.
Well, I just conscious of time. Would you be amenable to someone like myself emailing you if we have further questions?
Would I welcome your emails? Absolutely. The more information I have, the more decision and informed decision power that we have to bring forth progressive, positive implementations and programs that serve the community. One of the things, if anyone ever feels that they are being shut out or have no communication or anything like that, please don't feel that way. My phone numbers are posted on our website. They're attached to our committee emails. Like I said, any time of the day or night, 4 a.m. I might take a few minutes to call you back, but I will definitely call you back. But every ounce of communication you can provide us would be absolutely welcome. If you have people contacting your committee that are saying, hey, what are we going to do with this? Please bring it forth to us. And I will definitely address it immediately. I'll acknowledge it. I will work with you to bring forth changes and move forward into a brighter and better future.
Thank you. I'm not in the habit of emailing at 4 a.m., but I appreciate your willingness to communicate.
I don't sleep for whatever reason. I'm one of those people that, okay, I'm good to go.
Oh, thanks, Joseph. That's great. A great dialogue today. Is there any questions from anybody else? No, Joseph, you've handled all those questions quite admirably, and we really appreciate your time today. That is for sure. And you're doing great work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
thank you very much,
yeah.
Madam Chair, and to everybody, to your dedication and commitment on this committee. I applaud you. I'm sure you have the same struggles that we all have, where there's such a flood of information. Again, I'm here to help. You're here to help. Let's come together and move forward to something far better in the future.
And I take it your email is probably is on the KATC site as well as your phone number. Okay. Much less intrusive. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And you, everybody, have a wonderful day and enjoy. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks. Take care. Okay, so we're moving on to item 6, which is briefings. You'll see that there are no briefings for today's meeting. So we're moving on to item number 7, which is business. The first item of business is our first report. Our first report is the Accessibility Office update for Q3 2023. I'll invite staff to introduce this report. Is that you, Derek?
That is me, Janice. Good afternoon,
Welcome.
everybody. Thank you. I'll provide a quick overview and then happy to answer any questions or take any comments. So the first part of the report covers the Accessibility Office statistics from the third quarter. So inquiries were down in the third quarter from the second quarter of this year. Comparing previous trends for the third quarter, they're similar to the year 2022. And in general, as we've seen over comparing the last 4 years, inquiries are up, particularly now that we're in more of a post-COVID time period. There's more interaction with city services, and naturally inquiries are going up. As you'll notice from my last several reports, the bulk of the inquiries are related to parking. So that is consistent, and that the inquiries parking related often deal with reports of persons parking improperly in accessible spaces, people requesting reviews of tickets issued for parking illegally in an accessible space, and also for people reporting cars that are parked illegally as well. So we also see inquiries that are in line with the averages over the last several years for transit and roads and sidewalks inquiries. So those are staying consistent. Two categories we did notice increase, though, were solid waste and building services, which often don't have large accessibility inquiry components. With solid waste, they appeared to be mostly related to service issues such as containers obstructing sidewalks for people, as well as there have been some reports before council recently about proposed changes to the garbage collection system, which would move to a large cart system. So there were accessibility concerns about that brought forward for more information. With respect to building services, there were mostly inquiries, people inquiring about private either businesses or residents and what the building code accessibility requirements are there. So a lot of information requests. So that takes us through the service inquiries. Two other items I will point out in the report. The Celebrating Accessibility Awards, you have been receiving lots of emails from myself and Christine regarding that. Yesterday, or I think yesterday, Tuesday, had the pleasure of meeting with Dinah, Councillor Tozo, and Penny to select the winners. So 4 winners have been selected, 2 community members and 2 community organizations. Still in the process of letting them know, so I won't advise yet who has won, but they are all very worthy award recipients, and they will be recognized at the event on Thursday, November 30th from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Donald Gordon Hotel and Conference Center. So very excited for that. Mayor Patterson will be there to hand out the awards, and we'll also have a guest speaker, Megan Ingram, who is a disability studies scholar and filmmaker, and she will be screening her short film about, I always get the title wrong. It is not, it's disability and identity. I may have put it out as disability and inclusion, but disability and identity. So very excited for that. Also, as part of recognition for International Day of Persons with Disabilities, City Hall will be illuminated in blue on December 3rd. So we try and have the ceremony around the same date as that day. And I guess 2 last items I'll mention quickly is the work plan is almost completed for this year. 2 items that were supposed to come this month were deferred. The EDI office is currently undergoing some staffing changes, so they are rewriting their work plan and will be coming to the committee in early 2024. Also will be the accessible consultation process policy will be coming then. It just had to go through some additional refinement from our legal services staff. And finally, I will point out that at the end of the month, it is the end of term for many people on the committee. So those who were interested in coming back have reapplied, and we will have a new committee with some new members meeting in January of 2024 at a meeting to be determined. So those who are continuing the rest of their term, you'll see some more communication about that later on this year. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments, Janice.
Thanks, Derek. Okay, so do any of the committee members have any questions for Derek? No, seeing none. Thank you, Derek, for the presentation. I didn't miss anybody's hand, did I? No, nobody's put up their hand. Are there any members of the public today?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, there are no members of the public online.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so working group reports is the next area we'll be discussing. Would staff please introduce the Built Environment Working Group Q3 2023 report?
I will actually have Kim as the chair take care of that one, Janice. So I will let Kim provide an overview.
All right, thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since January, the BEWG has been very, very busy. We've actually done a total of 61 site plan reviews. And Susan Muckler can back me up on this. Her sense was that this has been a very, very busy year, but previously the subcommittee has not kept statistics. So we're working with Derek and Christine to see if we can better manage the workload of the subcommittee, because those 61 reviews took a lot of volunteer time. And with a very small committee, it's been a struggle to do those reviews to our satisfaction. We've done our best, but when we're short-staffed, there's only so much we can do.
Good. Thank you, Kim. And is there any questions for Kim on the Built Environment Working Group report from anybody? Thanks. Thanks, Kim. And I must apologize that I left you guys. My apologies. Okay, what are we moving on to now? Appointments to project teams. This is the last item of business, and it's to appoint members to the project teams that we didn't get to at the last meeting due to a loss of quorum. So the volunteers are as follows. For the Woodbine Park Ball Diamond number 5, it's Chantal Buzinski has volunteered. Thanks, Chantal. For the 2023 Celebrating Accessibility Awards, as you just heard Derek say, Councillor Tozo, Dinah Cotter, and Penny Bennett volunteered. Thank you. And now what we need is a mover and a seconder for these nominations, unless there's any other discussion about that. So can I have a mover for these nominations? Susan Mockler's hand went up very quickly, and the seconder, Kim Atwood. Thanks. Thank you too. Is there any discussion regarding those nominations? All in favor? Good. Okay. Motion carried. Not a motion. That is carried. Sorry, not a motion. Number 8 is motions, and there are no motions, and there's no, as well, there's no notices of motions. There's no other business. Correspondence, there is no correspondence. So we're on to the date of the next meeting, but that will be determined at a later time. I think, as Derek mentioned, that'll be sometime in early January once the new group is chosen. So I think we're on to adjournment. Do I have a move? Oh, I'm sorry.
I did have other business. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, I didn't put my hand up in time. So just 2 things. One is the Inclusive Play Project, which I'm trying to be a part of, is looking for any volunteers. So if anybody is interested in volunteering for that project, please let me know. They presented a little while ago. It's really getting off the ground, and it's gone through council. The other thing I wanted to mention is I do a lot of advocacy work, and one of the advocacy pieces I did was at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. I did speak briefly to the minister who's in charge of ODSP, and I did some advocacy work for increasing the ODSP. So that was one thing I've done well through my advocacy channels on council. But of course, I'm sort of your voice on council. If you have any other issues you'd like me to bring up, I'm happy to advocate for that.
Thank you, Councillor. I did see Aldo's hand went up pretty quickly when he asked for volunteers. Was that were you volunteering, Aldo?
Yes, for the Inclusive Playground project.
Okay. So maybe at the end
Just
of this
email
meeting,
me.
You can find his email there. Great. And I think Chantal, are you as well volunteering for that project or something else?
Yep, I am volunteering. I know that I'm on something quite similar, so I hope I'm not conflating the 2 committees, but if I haven't already volunteered, I would be happy to volunteer.
Okay, that's great. So just have everybody email you, Councillor Tozo, if they're interested. Yep. Okay, that's great.
Yep.
Thank you, and thank you for the advocacy work that you do. Derek's hand is up. Derek.
I just wanted to add on to Councillor Tozo's comments that Rachel Dornekamp, who's one of the organizers of the Inclusive Play Project, will actually have a booth set up at the Celebrating Accessibility Awards. So she's coming there to do some networking. So if you'd like to learn more about the project, you can talk with her directly during the reception.
Great, Derek. And for those awards, is there parking in front of the Donald Gordon Center, or
Yep.
what's that situation like?
So there is parking there, as well as I made sure to check. I believe there's at least 5 or 6 accessible parking spaces as well. So that was a key decision, was adequate parking at the location. So.
Okay, perfect. Dinah, your hand is up.
Where exactly is the Donald Gordon Center?
Good question. The Donald Gordon Center is located on Union Street, right, not on the corner of Sir John A, but very close between
Okay.
Union and Sir John A and College. So it is also right on several bus routes as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, so is there any other business that anybody wanted to bring up? No. Okay. Thanks, everybody. And now I need a mover for adjournment. I do believe Dinah's hand is up, and the seconder, Susan. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you. Have a great November and December. We'll see you all in January. Thanks.